Elly, thank you for joining me today. For anyone watching, Elly recently completed Lean Six Sigma Green Belt course, and she went on to deliver a really impactful improvement project. She kindly agreed to share her story and walk us through what she changed and the difference it's made. Now, before we get into the project itself, Elly, could you please introduce yourself and just tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, sure. So obviously my name's Ellie. I am the operational hub supervisor at Balfour Beatty Living Places in the Lincolnshire contract. I've been working here for a year and a half now. And then obviously started my lean project sort of towards the back end of last year, and then just sort of watched it grow from there. Really, it's massively helped in my role and sort of looking at streamlining processes and stuff. So it's been good. It's incorporated into what I do and how I sort of help my team day to day, which has been good.
Excellent. So, why don't we start with the situation you were seeing? So, what was happening with the traffic management before you took this on as a project?
Um, so we, so the team that I work in, because it's sort of a performance management role. We were seeing aborts come through from different teams all throughout the contract, different reasons. But I noticed there was one reason that was coming through multiple times a day, and it was the fact that teams were turning up on site to complete work, but they didn't have the correct traffic management with them for the site that they were attending. When I started looking into it a bit more, it turns out the TM that they were requesting once they got there, so they would go with traffic lights, for example, but they would attend and say it needed a road closure. It turns out the supervisors were actually requesting road closures, but for some reason on the systems that we use, the supervisor's request wasn't visible to the gangs when they got to site. So they could only see what had been suggested by our client when they initially raised the job, not what was actually needed after the job had been reviewed before it got scheduled.
I see. So, just so I'm clear, and to the viewers here, so this wasn't a one-off problem. So,
No,
when
it
you looked into
was,
this actually revealed a pattern. This was an ongoing issue you
yeah,
decided to address.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it was happening constantly. It was borderline every abort that we had for traffic management. It was because they just couldn't see the information clearly,
Hmm.
which in my
Interesting.
head I was like, why can't they see that? Because that surely would solve a
So,
lot of problems. So
So, if I remember correctly, when you started looking into the data and you saw the pattern, one of the first things you did was actually having conversation with the depot supervisors. You didn't go
mhm,
with the improvement as such. You
yeah,
first had conversation with people actually doing the job. So, what this
yeah.
conversation look like when you approach people with the issue to be rectified?
So every morning the supervisors brief out the to the gangs what jobs they need to complete that day. Um, any jobs that had a permit on, the traffic management was listed on there, but the other jobs, for whatever reason, the traffic management that they needed for the jobs wasn't on this briefing officially. So I had a chat with them and said, look, this is an issue that we're getting. This is happening quite a lot. You need to make sure this is now incorporated into your morning briefings so that they're not attending, having to come away and then re-attending, because not only is it a waste of time, like they're wasting fuel going back and forth. We're not completing as many jobs as we should be during the day because the same thing's happening over and over again. It's
Fair
having
enough.
quite a big knock-on effect, and therefore we're failing jobs because we're not getting them done the first time we're attending. It was a whole thing, and so they did listen and they did start briefing that out, and we did notice after the brief had changed that the number of aborts had dropped, but it still sort of wasn't where I wanted it. We were still getting a lot more than I'd like daily.
So
So
can I just clarify? Supervisors were the first people you spoke with, but that wasn't really the end of the interaction with stakeholders. Then you brought the client and the IT team to
yeah,
support the
hmm
projects.
yeah. So spoke to a couple of people from the client because they work on our systems a lot as well. So spoke to them to find out whether it was going to be possible. And then once I spoke to them, we then looked at the team who actually do the background of the systems that we work on. Um, and sort of asked them if they were able to create an attribute because we already had something on there that said what the client suggested traffic management was from when they initially raised the job, but we didn't actually have what we actually need for the job once it had been reviewed. So I was like, can we essentially just have what we already have? We spoke about a few different options, like whether I could get it put in the notes or whether if the supervisor selects their drop down that they normally do, could that auto populate somewhere else? We looked at a few different options to see what was going to be the sort of most cost effective for them and also the most productive for us, I guess. And it came up as essentially just duplicating what the client already had, but
Sure.
differentiating that this is what's suggested from the client, but this is what's been requested from the people who actually review the job. Um, and then that got put in, and then I noticed a sort of dramatic reduce in the amount of aborts we were getting for it once it had been implemented.
So this was really my next question because I was expecting, and I guess everyone watching was expecting you to say that all the visits that were aborted went down dramatically because of the changes. But what was the financial impact? Because that really didn't go unnoticed, right? There was a
Yeah,
significant
so
cost value to it as well.
yeah, when I first started looking at this, my sort of initial goal was that so essentially whenever we fail a quarter, we get I think it's £25,000 fine,
Hmm.
and the amount of fails that we're having due to the amount of aborts were massively contributing to the fact that we were failing our KPI each month, therefore resulting in these fines. Um, Once I started looking into it more, I also became aware that as well as us being fined for failing the KPI, every time we visited a job and aborted it, the client was actually paying us an aborted visit cost.
Hmm.
So not only were we having to pay out money for failing, they were also having to pay us money for attending and not doing anything. So it was sort of a, if I can fix this, they're not having to spend money and we're also not having to spend money. And it felt a bit like a win-win for everybody. But we actually haven't failed a quarter since this project's been implemented. We've not. It's because it's reduced the amount of fails and the amount of aborted visits. We've massively reduced that, and then also the cost that the client's been having to pay to us in aborted visits has drastically gone down as well. I think at its peak they were spending like £1,800 a month to
Hmm.
us just on aborted visits, but towards the end of it, I think it averaged out at about £150 a month, which is a massive drop in what they're having to pay. Obviously, there's other aborts that do come through, so they're still having to pay for the odd ones that come through for different reasons. But in for just the traffic management abort reasons, it's dropped from £1,800 a month to about £150 a month.
And just to put all of this into the context of the overall saving that you've seen so far, since the project was kicked off and was rolling out,
Mm-hmm.
week over week, if I remember correctly, you were seeing over £100,000 saved so far already. That's including the penalties that you've mentioned, the quarterly penalties. So I'm
Yeah,
just mentioning the number to give people who are listening to us a bit of a context to the significance of the project. We can talk about the
yeah,
cost of the visit, we can talk about the cost of fuel, and we can also talk about the cost of the penalties. But when you start looking into the overall number, £100,000, it's not
yeah.
insignificant, isn't it?
No, and that's just the fines from us as well. So because the attribute was implemented in October last year, that's when
Hmm.
I got the attribute added. So we've had 4 quarters since then, which is essentially £100,000 because we've not had to pay out the 25 for
Absolutely,
any of it.
absolutely.
And then obviously for the client as well, I'm not 100% sure how much total is that we've saved for them, but
Hmm.
the it yeah it dropped dramatically. When did I think the August 2024? That was when I briefed it out to the supervisors that they needed to brief it out more effectively. Um, at that point, they were sitting at around £1,200 that they were
Hmm.
still having to pay us in aborted visits. And the next month in September, it dropped to £300. And then it's
Fantastic.
just carried on dropping since then. So,
Really good, really good.
yeah,
So, was there anything from the Lean Six Sigma training that helped you approach this in more structured way?
yeah, definitely. It meant that I was able to sort of break it down into stages and see. I'm, I ramble quite a lot and I very much go around the houses in a lot of things I do. I don't always go to sort of the easiest way to get somewhere, but I think after sitting through the course with yourself and actually looking at processes and registering how much sometimes steps can just be a complete waste of time and just not necessary.
Hmm.
It did make me sort of step back and be like, right, this is who I need to contact, this is how I need to do this, like rather than sort of contacting 20 different people trying to get an answer. It made me just sort of actually sit and think about the whole thing rather than just going in all guns blazing, which I usually do. So yeah, it
Fair
was
enough.
nice. It was helpful to just sit and strip it all back and then be like, right, this is the problem. This is how I resolve it. And it, to be fair, I think I put in my initial what I wanted to do. I thought everything was going to take me a lot longer to implement than it actually did because
Hmm.
I'm so used to sort of going around the houses and things taking me a little while to get where I want them to be. But yeah, after sitting back and stripping the process back and thinking, this is how it is now, this is what it needs to be. How do I get there? It was,
So,
yeah, it was
no,
implemented within
that's
a
really
couple of
good.
months and I did not expect that.
Okay, so on the back of that, if someone else was thinking about improving a process in their area, regardless of what this process might be, what would be one piece of advice you would give to this person based on your experience? Just one
Oh,
advice, what would you say to someone who is, say, completely new to the concept of improvement, dropped into the
mm,
middle of an issue and asked to rectify the situation? If you were to give them something to start with, what would you say?
100% sort of review the steps of that process that's happening at the minute and really break it down and see what is adding value and what's not. Um, and then go from there and to see how you can improve it. I think there's, even without sort of thinking about it, I do that a lot now, way more than I ever used to with a lot of the different processes and stuff we've got in place here. Not even necessarily as intentional process improvement, but I'll be doing something and I'm like, this just seems completely invalid. Like it's just a waste of time and it's sort of becoming sort of second nature rather than I'm doing it because I'm having to think about it, if that makes sense. It's now just sort of become a bit of an autopilot thing for me that I'm reviewing the processes as we're doing them, which is it's good. But yeah, I would definitely say have a look at the full process and really review it and see what you can take out and or what could be added in even to add more value and just what needs changing around.
Fair enough. Ellie, thank you very much for sharing this. It just shows how a clear change in how the information flows can save hundreds of thousands of pounds and effectively make day-to-day work smoother for everyone. So really well done for the project. Fantastic efforts. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for giving everyone else opportunity to actually hear you talking about the improvements, talking about lean, and making it sound like anyone can effectively bring this on and make an impactful change in the business. So once again, thank you very much for being here today.
It's okay. Thanks for having me.